So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. This is the second session that we are having in the Speakeasy in terms of our fireside chats. There's a whole programme being put together to take us right through till the second week of January. And it's just an opportunity to touch base, get to know each other a little bit better, and to share some stories and industry folk with you all. So this evening, we're really thrilled to be joined by Heather Penn, who many of you will know, I'm sure. Heather is the greatest woman behind John Penn from SSE Audio, based in the Midlands, who have been part of our industry for probably the last 30 plus years.
45,
there we are, look, many more. So Heather's going to just talk through some of her career, some of our highlights and her lowlights, give us a real flavour for what it was like, particularly to be a woman in the industry all those years ago. And as you know, I'm Sarah, Director of SC Productions, but I also set up NOWIE, the Network of Women in Events, and very much in my career have championed women going forward in the event industry, which is very broad, and lots of us do many different things. But I see Heather really as one of those sort of four sisters in terms of someone who was out there doing it long before we got going. So it's really brilliant to sort of blend those two passions. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We will be taking questions during the session, so you can use your Q&A button for that, and I've got them coming up. Some of those, if you're comfortable, I will ask you to you can unmute yourselves and ask the question direct, so I'll let you know if we're going to do that. Also, we've disabled the chat facility just because it gets a bit complicated, so all the questions, if they can just come through the Q&A. And as I said, for those who are just joining, we are recording the session this evening so that they can be used again in the future, and we're hoping perhaps to do a podcast of all of them going forward in the new year. So really this is an opportunity for you to ask, to learn, to gain, to share perhaps some stories you have of Heather and her career with us this evening. We'll be sort of 45 minutes to an hour, so we're not going to keep you all night, but it's just a really nice time for us to share in someone who's had a great career in our industry. So Heather, welcome. Thank you.
Hi, hello everyone. Nice for
joining us.
I can't actually see anyone, but I'm sure you're all out there somewhere. Yeah.
So Heather, you are, as you told me the other day, heading now precariously towards your retirement in February after
I'm retiring at Christmas. So actually, I've only really got a week to go because we're breaking up for Christmas on the 18th. Because it's been such a weird year, as everyone knows, we're actually finishing early so that people can use up their holidays, because there's not an awful lot going on anyway. So actually, this is my penultimate week, which is really strange.
Well, perfect. I'm glad you fitted us in then, with so much going on. But, you know, obviously, Heather, as you said, that you've been with the company 45 years.
Well, since its inception, yes.
Yeah, because, which is brilliant. So what was it like that? I mean, when you started, were you with John at that time? Were you a budding sound engineer yourself?
No,
beginnings?
Nothing like that. I mean, John and I met at Teacher Training College of all things. So roll back to 1973, and I didn't do very well in my A-levels. And so the second thing after going to uni was go to Teacher Training College if you didn't get great A-levels. So I decided to do that, even though I didn't really want to be a teacher. And John did exactly the same. He was actually from Margate, but he was living in Liverpool at the time. I was from Sheffield. And so in our first year we met, and actually we were friends for the whole of the first year because I had another boyfriend. And then towards the end, we ended up one evening talking, and he was totally passionate about the music industry, such as it was, because there wasn't much of it in those days. I mean, really, it was, you know, the Beatles hadn't even been going all that long. We were only 10 years in. And he was so passionate about the fact that was what he wanted to do. And he'd gone for his careers advice when he was 16. and told the guy, the careers advisor, that what he wanted to do was, well, be a roadie, because they were called roadies in those days. And he was firmly told that that wasn't a career. There were no careers in that industry. And it's true, there were no courses. You couldn't go to university and learn about this. It was all so new. But he was so passionate about it. And so we got together, and really we just decided to start the business together. And so I just really was on his coattails, to be honest. It wasn't me at all. But there again, I was involved right from the beginning. And I decided to stay on at college because, you know, we needed to have money. And so I did finish my degree, and I did end up teaching for 2 years. John started the business. He left college after the first year, went to work in a music shop, and then came back to Nottingham, and we started the business in our student house in the garage. So we actually started building cabinets in the garage of our student house, because we couldn't afford to buy them. Although we were lucky enough to be gifted 2 eliminator bins, Electro Voice ones, and a couple of power amps. And so we started out it must have been in our 2nd or 3rd year of college, which would have been in 1975. We started out with a disco, because we managed to get a set of disco decks as well. So we were basically like a rock disco. And we went around the colleges, and well, we went all over the country with the rock disco. And then we managed to get together an audio master mixing console, which was like the original. In fact, we've got one at work now, because we were bought one for our 40th anniversary party, as a bit of history. So it's a 5-channel mixing console. We managed to get that together. So we put that with the eliminator bins and the power amps, and got a little PA system together. But then John got himself totally carried away. So he wanted to then do PAs for bands, but then we'd already got a load of rock discos booked. So he ended up leaving me to do the discos, which I didn't really like doing, because I'm very much a backroom girl. So I didn't like doing this sort of talking between the songs. So I just used to do, well, you couldn't even mix them together in those days. It was dual decks, you know, it wasn't nothing like the mixing stuff today. So I was doing the discos and he was doing the gigs. And then we stopped doing the discos and we moved on to the gigs. And we got premises in 1979, probably. And I can remember him coming home. We were living in Nottingham. And he said, oh, I found this fantastic place. And it was actually the stables for Players Cigarettes. So when Players Cigarettes, because they started out in Nottingham, and it was a huge old factory, but they had a sort of annex bit, which were the stables where they used to keep their horses, because they used to take cigarettes out on carts, you know, I mean, that long ago. And so he'd rented the stables, which was quite small. I think it was about 1,500 square feet. And it was £25 a week. And I went absolutely ballistic. I was like, how are we ever going to afford £25 a week? It's going to be terrible. Anyway, I was still teaching at that point because we needed to get a mortgage. But what I used to do, because the school that I was teaching at was only actually about 3 miles away from the stables. And so what I used to do was, John used to drop me at school because we only had 1 car, and I'd teach all day, and then I'd leave at 3 o'clock, 3:30 after school, and I'd walk down to the stables and then carry on working. So that was how it all started. And it did build up really quite quickly. I mean, there was a huge, I suppose punk came a little bit later, but there was a huge explosion in music bands playing, and the early bands that we played with we got, I think one of the first bands we worked with was Rugulator, Deaf School, we did the Concert Angels, but our big break was really getting the Darts. And I mean, these are all names that probably people don't even remember now, but the Darts were actually really huge, end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. And as they grew, we grew, because they were wanting to use our equipment. We didn't have very much. We were building it, physically building it. And every time they went out, they were doing bigger and bigger gigs. And we started out with a transit van, and then it went to like a Luton Transit, and then it went to a 7.5 tonner, or 3 tonners we used to call them. They're 7.5 tonners now. And so every time they went out, they were requiring more and more equipment because they were doing bigger and bigger shows. And so we were just building this equipment as quickly as we could to keep up with them. So we had a big expansion in 79, and working with them. I was doing a lot of the, I suppose I was doing the accounts. I don't think we had much in the way of accounts in those days. I mean, because that's what I'm known for nowadays. I'm basically the accountant, although I've not got any accountancy qualifications. I've just learned as I've gone along by the seat of my pants. But in those days, I did everything. So I was building flight cases, and we didn't have any. We had a compressor later on, but when we were first building flight cases, we didn't even have any compressed air. So, you know, the riveters that we used to rivet the flight cases with were hand riveters that we used to put like poles on the end of, so you could get more traction to rivet the cases. And we used to build cabinets. So we built we used to copy the JBL cabinets. So 4560s were the base, the single 15 with the flare on them. We used to build those, and we used to build the 2x12 mid-range cabinets, and we used to put ATC speakers in those, and then the JBL compression speakers on the top, the horns. So yeah, I used to do everything, and I used to drive trucks a lot as well. So if, you know, to get the materials, because we had a firm up in Yorkshire that did the laminating the fiberboard onto the plywood for the flight cases. So I used to go up and get that, and I'd be constantly driving down to London to get flight case parts. So I was driving a lot. This was after I left school. So
did you have much of a workforce, Heather, by this point? Were there sort of other individuals?
Handful of people, half a dozen. Yeah.
All men.
And then it grew. So by the early 80s, we moved out of the stables into a much bigger workshop, and because really the cabinets, we were selling quite a lot of them as well as using them ourselves. And so that was actually quite a big part of what we were doing. So we needed a lot of space, and we took on a lot more people, and we actually grew very quickly. But then, you know, we grew too fast. Margaret Thatcher came in. It all went to shit, to be honest, because we weren't very good at collecting in the money that people owed us. And so we got ourselves in a bit of a mess in about 1984. I mean, actually, I could do with John here because he's absolutely brilliant with dates. And I'm useless with dates. Although John is one of those annoying people who says, oh, it was in 1983 and it was a Thursday. And I think over the years, I've realised I'm sure he makes it up. I think that he says everything with such conviction that people believe him. But anyway.
Did you ever have that moment where you sort of suddenly were providing equipment for like one of the festivals, or, you know, back in the early days of Nebworth or things like that? That
was so much later. You know, I mean, really, this was a complete slow burn. You know, I can remember going into a gig like the Theatre Royal in Nottingham, which a lot of you will have been into, or that size gig, and thinking, oh my God, this is so big. How could we ever put anything in here? You know, how could we do this? And then, you know, sort of 10 years later, you end up in the NEC going, oh my God, this is so big, you know. And then another 10 years later, you end up, you know, out front at Leeds or Reading or Glastonbury, and you're going, oh my God, you know, look what we're doing now. So, I mean, but it has been, it was a very slow burn. I mean, we started doing Reading quite early on. So yeah, we did get into the festivals early, and the festivals are difficult to do because, you know, I'm sure that everybody thinks that we leave all the gear on the truck and it just goes from all the trucks, plural, and all the gears just goes from one festival to the next, and it really isn't like that at all. You know, as anyone in the industry knows, it comes back every Monday completely muddy and messed up. and then it goes into a completely different format for the festival the following weekend. So, you know, you're incredibly busy on the Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and then you load out the festival for the following weekend. It all goes away, you tidy up, and then it all comes back again on the Monday. But, you know, they're never the same, and it's really, really difficult. And it's very difficult to do efficiently, but we got into it really early on, and we just got a model together. I mean, really, it's all about the staff and the crew and just being really efficient.
Yeah, so in terms of your crew and the staff, obviously over the years you've taken on sound engineers and techs and, you know, a whole myriad of staff, and presumably some makers and, you know, flight case makers still even now and things, and warehouse staff. You know, in terms of your connectivity with them, have you sort of mentored a lot of those people that have come through? I'm guessing they're mainly
I don't teach them how to make flight cases anymore, no, because I stopped doing that in about, I don't know, well, basically I stopped doing all that sort of stuff because we had Alex in 1982, and Alex is, if people know, is now in charge with Spencer of SSE, and so when I had Alex, who was our first kid, I started taking a back seat and I worked part-time. And so that was really when my role in the accounts, you know, basically I took over all the financials after that, and I stopped doing all the practical stuff. But yeah, I mean, I suppose I still do mentor people because I have, you know, I have got vast experience because I've done every job in the business basically. But things, as women will know, it's very difficult when you have kids because, you know, juggling the two things is quite hard. And it was probably even harder in those days because, you know, nowadays women are expected to have careers, but back then women weren't particularly expected to have careers when you had kids, and, you know, it was normal to have a little part-time job. And
do you think that sort of inspired your kids to go into the business, that they sort of grew up living and breathing it?
Well, they did. They definitely grew up living and breathing it, and they did not appreciate it at the time, not even slightly. So they both of them had a pact that neither of them would come into the business, because we've got a daughter who's 3 years younger than Alex, Katie. And so they always had this pact, and then they both worked for us through their teenage years in holidays and what have you. And Alex in particular he went off on tour when he was 18 and had a really good time and was very good at it and is trained up. But then when he went to university, he decided he didn't want to do what we do. And so he did film at university. And actually it was a good degree, but it wasn't anything to do with what we do. And then he went off traveling for a year. But then when he came back, he still didn't know what he wanted to do. And we had a vacancy due to a tragic accident where, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but we had a sales guy called Richard who sadly died at the TPI Awards. And this was, oh gosh, how long ago? 10 years ago, probably. Could be longer. John would tell you the exact date. I can't remember. And so Alex returned from his travels only weeks after this awful thing had happened. And at that point in time, our company didn't really have a sales department. We just had Richard who would mainly sell ex-hire equipment. And John's saying, he's just walked in the room and he's going, 7. So it's 7 years ago. He's obviously
2007.
Oh, 2007. Not 7 years ago, 2000.
13 years ago.
I told him not to listen, but he's obviously round the back listening. I've lost my train of thought now. So so Alex joined us in the sales seat, which he really didn't want to do because the hire is so much more glamorous, isn't it, than selling a bit of used equipment. But what happened was he came in and started, and he was absolutely brilliant at it. And he ended up building a whole department. So since 2007, that is when we started the sales and installations, which Alex is still at the helm of. And it's now 50% of our business. It's huge. And I tell you what, during this year, it's been absolutely essential because oh my God, what a year, which everyone is saying clearly, we're all in the same boat. It's all absolutely terrible. But because we do sales and installations, I mean, yes, we're decimated, but we're probably doing like 2% of turnover on the higher side, but we're probably doing more like 7, 8, even maybe 10% on the sales and installation side. So at least we're doing something. And it's not, you know, it has been absolutely terrible. And I mean, the worst thing for us has been that, you know, we started off at the beginning of this year with 193 people, because we'd been going like an express train. And over the last few years, I mean, a lot of you will know that we've grown through acquisition, which is another story, which we could go into in a bit if you want to. What was I saying? We've grown through acquisition.
The number of staff
going like an
193.
Because of that, yeah, we've been getting more and more and more people. Because our turnover has been rocketing. And so really over the last 5 years, we've probably doubled the workforce. But what's happened now this year is, sadly, we had no choice but to make, well, 75 people redundant. And it's awful, you know, because all these people are really good people. We don't hire people who aren't really good. So it's been absolutely tragic. And I mean, some of these people have been with us for years. And we've got such a loyal workforce. It's terrible, but we have lost more people on the higher side than the sales side, because the higher side has been more decimated than the sales side. Yeah. Sorry.
In terms of, well, no, just in terms of that workforce, and you obviously, I think one thing that we're all really aware of in our industry, and I know many people on this call tonight will be as well, is that we are really a big family, and whether we all know each other well or however it is, you know, you all look after your own, your staff, are your reputation, everything about your delivery. And, you know, I was going to ask you really when you sort of became aware of sort of your competitors, which I know now as a sort of unit under the acquisitions, you've sort of become one unit. But when back over time, did you sort of become aware of other companies chomping at your heels a little bit to get a slice of that market, which, you know, to be fair, like you say, back in the sort of 80s, you had a really good lion's share of?
Well, we didn't. I mean, you know, the big companies in those days were companies like Audio Lease, TechServe, you know, there were, and we were quite small, and it, you know, it did take us a long time to grow. But then we realised that actually, if we wanted to get more market share, then really, rather than just trying to get more market share, it made more sense to buy other companies. And also we knew that we needed to diversify as well. And that's been a saving grace too. And so we've acquired companies that do something slightly different in some cases. So one of the first companies, well, in fact, the very first company we bought, which was an experiment, was Melpomen in France. And that was difficult. You know, it's been difficult operating in France all those years. But we actually sold Melpo about 3 or 4 years ago, which is a good job that we did now because of Brexit, because I think that would all be, you know, difficult. But we practiced on Melpo, and they were out in France, so nobody really knew what was going on. The first company that we acquired in the UK was a little company in London called Tarzin. And what they did was they had fixed installations in nightclubs on contract rental. And so this was a new departure for us. And so we acquired them along with, oh my gosh, the gear wasn't very good that they got. And they got all these contract rentals in about 50 or 60 nightclubs around, mainly in London, but not all in, not exclusively. And then over a number of years, we've gradually replaced the equipment to make it really good stuff, because the problem was, because it was so useless, the stuff, it would always break down. So we had to have like 3 service engineers constantly running around all these clubs fixing things. But as soon as you spent the money and put decent gear in, then you don't have to go out and fix it all the time. So actually it's false economy using cheap gear. So that was something that was a bit of a departure. And then in 2008, we bought Kane Green, and that's Jan, who's a great friend. And Jan came to us mainly because, you know, we'd been talking to him for a while, but then his premises were in Tottenham, right next to the new Tottenham Stadium, which ironically, years later, we fitted out all the audio in. So that's the biggest contract we've ever done, which we completed last year, which was the complete audio system throughout the whole stadium, but not just in the stadium, but throughout all the corridors and everything else. So that was a fantastic thing. But anyway, Jan's premises were right next to the old Tottenham Stadium, and he was compulsorily purchased because of them wanting to extend. Yeah. So he was in the position where he could either sell to us or he was going to have to go and find somewhere else. And I think he thought it would just be easier to sell to us. And it was great. I mean, that was really good. And then in 2012, we acquired a company called ETA. And this was Eddie Thomas, who is well known in the installation, the big installations, i.e. the Tottenham's football clubs, that sort of thing. And so we got his expertise, and that was when we really set out on that trail of doing those really big installations, which has been really good. And that Tottenham job went so well. I mean, obviously it's quietened down this year because even the football clubs have got no money. But you know, that set us in good stead for the future, and we've been doing a lot more quotes of big stuff like that.
Oh, brilliant! We've got a question in. Which is from Nikki, and she's asking, what period of time in your working life have you enjoyed most and why? There's obviously lots of things you've talked about here now.
Yeah, I think probably, I think probably the early days, you know, when you're mucking in and doing everything. But there's been great, I mean, I've had some great times, you know. I remember going on, I've been out on gigs as well. So I went to Vienna with the Undertones, and that was brilliant. Because it wasn't like get on a plane and fly to Vienna. It was getting a transit van and drive to Vienna, you know, and do a gig at the end of it. And I've done loads of really good stuff. I've been very lucky. But I think definitely, I mean, trust me, the most interesting thing about my job is not sitting behind my desk doing the accounts, which I've spent most of my life doing. The great thing has been getting out to the shows, you know, going to the festival, standing on front of house, feeling really proud about what the company's achieved and where we've got to. Yeah, it's about doing and getting out there, not about running the business.
Yeah. And when we were chatting the other day, I said to you, behind every great man, there's a greater woman. And you made a quip about how without you behind John, he'd have gone in some crazy directions. But,
yeah, I mean, John,
partnership's obviously been very strong for the pair of you through this time.
Well, I think, you know, right from the outset, when I first met John and he was so passionate about what he wanted to do. I mean, John is still like that now. So he's just extremely gung-ho. And, you know, it's always like, let's do this, let's buy this, let's do that. And I've always been the one pulling on the reins going, no, let's just think about this. Let's just slow down. And, you know, we did almost go bust in the early 80s, which I alluded to earlier when I said it all went to shit. And, you know, we did lose our house over that because we'd got a bank overdraft at the time, you know, which we thought was enormous. It was £10,000, you know, it's absolutely nothing nowadays. But we got into trouble because somebody didn't pay us, and it was a lot of money. And so we didn't actually go bust, but we had to go into an arrangement with our creditors where we ended up paying them 30 pence in the pound. Everybody was so supportive. It was brilliant. But in order to pay the overdraft back to the bank, we had to sell our house. So our very first house we lost, but we were even quite canny about that, in that the bank could have repossessed it. But we'd got Alex as a very young kid. And so we made the bank feel very guilty by saying, you know, you can't put us out on the street. We're a young family. We'll go to the newspapers. We've always manipulated PR quite well in that respect. And we said, look, just give us a few months. We'll sell the house ourselves. We promise we'll pay you, which we did do. But that meant that, you know, it wasn't a repossession. We got a proper price for the house. We were able to pay the bank back, and we just went and got another house. So, you know, I do think that could have happened several times in our career if it hadn't been for me after that, because after that, you know, you only have to lose your house once, and then you're very careful in terms of signing personal guarantees. I just, you know, and to be fair to John, he wouldn't sign a personal guarantee after that either, because, you know, it's too much money. and you've got too much to lose.
And I think even now in, I know you're talking about sort of 20 or so years ago, but even now in this year of 2020 that we've had, I think for lots of us who are business proprietors who've got, made those investments, we've sort of really put ourselves out there as people to drive our industry forward. And actually when those financials change overnight in some ways, particularly this year, it's really frightening. And it really makes you think about what you've got at risk and where your family's at risk. And so I think, ironically, those things still happen all the time. And there's still those occasions where someone doesn't pay the bill, a client doesn't come through on the money. So, it's horrible.
I mean, it still happens to us a lot as well. But I mean, when you're as big as we are now, you can, I think you just take into account that you're going to lose a bit each year, but you try hard not to. But yeah, this year's been terrible for people. I mean, all the people who've had to take out the CBILS loans, those have all got to be paid back. The furlough's been really helpful. To be honest, from our point of view as a company, that's all we've had. And it has been great, but we've not managed to get anything else apart from the furlough. It's been a bit annoying that we couldn't get the rates relief because when you hear on the news that Asda, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, they all got rates relief, and you think, flipping heck, they've all done brilliantly well out of the pandemic, which is why, thank God, they're all doing the right thing now and paying it back. But then, I do think the events industry has been left out in the cold a lot. And it's been really interesting what's gone on because, the WeMakeEvents thing is brilliant because it's a body that's come together since this pandemic started. And we all realise now that this has been needed all along, that we've never had this sort of committee of people fighting. Well,
there's just never been that synergy between us all. We all know we're there, but we've never really come together when we're sort of identified that we don't really have a body.
We've never needed to before, have we? I mean, I suppose the good thing about our industry is that everybody's friends. I mean, yes, we've got competitors, Adlib are a huge competitor, but guess what? They're friends as well. Brit Rowe are a big competitor, but, we go out for dinner with Brian and Mike and have a great time because, I mean, we're so fortunate to work in this industry where we might compete against each other, but we're all really good friends. And I'm really pleased that this, I do think that some really good things have come out of this pandemic.
Absolutely. Andrew Bishop's got a question. Andrew, are you comfortable to ask the question direct? Or I think you need to unmute.
You need to unmute and show your video so I can see you.
Am I sharing? Let's just see.
Oh, I can hear you.
Your audio. Turn your video on as well if you can.
Limited on buttons.
Don't worry, we can hear you.
Do you just want to ask your question, Andrew?
Have we lost him?
I'm coming.
Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
Hi, Heather. This is really, really interesting. And my wife, who is a director of our little business, is sat upstairs in her office watching as well. My question is this. I too have, in my past, lost my family and lost my house through Carlsbro falling over in the credit crunch.
Yeah.
And that was very dark for me. How do you find the energy and the power to keep going when things get really, really dark?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think really because you have to, you've got no choice. You've got to get through it. And we've always felt that our staff are a family as well. And that we've needed to keep going for them. There are times when you felt like giving up, but really, to be honest, I always used to say to people, it's a bit like being a hamster on a wheel, that you've got on this wheel and you're scrabbling away and you can't actually get off. You can't get off. You've got to keep going. So yeah, really, we just pick ourselves up, dust ourselves down, and carry on. I mean, fortunately, I'm sure that you all know that we actually sold our business 2 years ago, and my goodness, aren't we lucky? because nobody could have foreseen this coming. I mean, and at the time we were like, oh, is it too early? Should we have hung on a bit longer? But in fact, certainly not. We shouldn't have done. But yeah, it is hard when you have these knocks. And we've had lots of them. It's helpful that there's two of you, and it's the same for you. You know, and I think we always had more difficult times in our relationship when I was teaching, and I think it's because you find it very difficult, even though you live really closely with a person, you find it really difficult to understand what it is they're going through. Whereas if you're working together, you fully understand what each one's going through, and you're going through it together. And because of that, you're a great support to each other. So I actually do think it's important to work together. And, you know, everyone always used to say to us, oh, how do you work together? And it's like, well, actually, I don't think we have to work together. Otherwise, we couldn't have achieved what we've achieved. The one thing that used to really get to me, and I'm sure it possibly gets to your wife as well, is when you get introduced and people always used to say, oh, this is John Penn and this is his wife, Heather. So I was always introduced as his wife, never as his business partner. And to be fair to John, he learned that it used to really wind me up. So he got used to saying to people, oh, well, she is my business partner. But there's a little lesson that you should, I'm sure, Andrew, that you always introduce your wife as your business partner.
No, without her, I'd be dead in the water. And,
yeah,
and
well,
like you, she's learned the accounts
off
purely by studying QuickBooks and reading things on Google. But Heather, thank you very, very much. It's dark at the moment, as you can see, but hopefully.
Well, good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Andrew. Brilliant. And anyone else? You know, we've got some time, so you know, please ask us questions. Please use this opportunity. So, so Heather, you know, obviously when we were talking the other day, you know, my great passion is to celebrate women in the industry and support young women coming into the industry and find opportunities for them. And I think sort of rock and roll and production is still one of those areas that has a male dominance.
It does.
And, you know, whereas there's other areas in event work where there are more women, particularly around the site management and, you know, production managers, you know, other roles that, you know, they can facilitate. So, I mean, have you seen, or are you aware really through your work and your company, how that demographic has changed or not really changed?
It has changed. It has, because I mean, for a long time, well, there was me, and we had a girl working for us back in the day in the 70s called Jan. So there was us two, and you know, we were the only women. Whereas now, I mean, we've got a girl, Amy, who works in the woodworking department, which is unusual. We've got a couple of girls, or probably more than a couple. We've got, you know, 5, 6 girls working in the warehouse, or the warehouses, because we've got several warehouses. I mean, it's still massively male dominated, but there are the opportunities there for women, and we do genuinely try to promote women, and we try to bring them in. We do quite a lot with students as well. We take students from LIPA, and John's just got involved with this new university in Dudley, which the name escapes me. He might be hiding around the corner. I don't think he is. He's not going to come in again. But he's got involved with that as well, and they're running. They've only opened this year, and they're running courses. I don't know how many women they've got, but you know, I do think women are seeing it more as a career choice, and it's definitely. I mean, it's a slow burn, but there are a lot more women nowadays than there used to be. Definitely. I mean, there was only me for a long time. Pippa Ridgway.
It's interesting when you say that John, you know, when he went to his careers advisor all those years ago, they told him this wasn't really the game that he should go into. I think that's the same now. Well, I think even now, careers teachers don't know that we do what we do, you know.
Well, you'd think not, because I mean, there are actually courses, aren't there? I mean, you know, you can go to LIPA and study sound engineering. You can go to a lot of universities. In fact, this has always been a bugbear with us, actually, that there are almost too many courses, and the kids go on the courses and then think, oh, you know, they're going to come out of it and be a sound engineer. But in fact, there aren't that many jobs at the end of it. So it's almost like we're getting too many students trained up. And, you know, people are disappointed at the end, and because there aren't the jobs there to be had. And it's only the really dedicated ones who get through. But I suppose that's the same in a lot of walks of life, to be honest, not just in ours.
I guess so. And I think one thing that 2020 is potentially a worry with is that some of that, you know, some of those skills, some of those people who've invested huge amounts of their time and life learnings into being really great at their craft, the reality of this year is pushing them away from our industry. And that's
absolutely. Travesty. I mean, we've got a number of crew who've gone and got other jobs. I mean, you know, one in particular who's an absolutely brilliant crew person, and he's in his 50s, worked for us for donkey's years, and he's gone and got a job as a Sainsbury's delivery driver, and he loves it. And he's like, oh, this is brilliant. I can see the grandkids. I'm actually earning the same money over the year. Fair enough, I'm working 5 days a week, but I know when I'm going home, and I don't have to live away from home. And he's loving it, and he's never going to come back. And we're going to lose so many really good people. And it's tragic. It's tragic as well, because it'd be interesting to see what happens next year, because, you know, it's interesting that today is V-Day, isn't it? The first vaccination day. And, you know, the beginning of the end, we hope, please God, of this nightmare. You know, so hopefully we might get a summer next year. Hopefully there might be gigs. Hopefully there'll be tours. Hopefully there'll be festivals. But will there be the crew there to man them? You know, in the summer, we've sometimes got as many as 100 people a week on freelance crew. You know, if we're doing sort of 4 or 5 festivals, which we can be, some weekends, some bigger than others, you know, and we've got tours out at the same time, you know, if we can't get those crew next year, we're going to have a big problem.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's got the answer to that.
There might be a shortage of equipment as well, because, you know, we know all the tours that got deferred from 2020 will hopefully go ahead in 21, but then you're going to have all the tours that would have gone in 21 anyway. So we might end up having a shortage of equipment as well as crew, you know, so it might actually be all really difficult, but at least it'll be a happy problem in that we'll have too much work rather than no work.
Well, yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. What a year.
Mr. Graham Brown has a question. Graham, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, Heather.
Hi, Graham.
Lovely to see you.
And you, I can't actually see you. I can just see a red G on the screen.
Okay.
Are you there?
I am here.
Yeah, I can hear you. It's fine. You can just ask if you don't want me to see you. I'm sure you're trying. Don't worry.
Always, yes. Technically challenged. One, yes. So there we go. There we go.
Oh, there you are. Oh, hi.
Excellent. So yeah, I mean, I'm just sort of hearing your tales, and I'm having known you for many years, and but it sort of really brings it into context when you sort of talk about everything you've been through, with nearly going bust, with growing the company, you know, and all the trials and tribulations that you've been through over 40 odd years. But as you say, we've just hit COVID, which has been an unforeseeable year. Totally, no business could plan for it a year this time last year, could we?
No.
And you know, and that's probably distracted the planning from something we could see coming, which was Brexit.
Oh God, yes.
And the oncoming climate emergency that's coming over the hill to face the whole industry. And we're hearing artists now talking about, do they want to tour? Do they want to, you know, festivals talking about how they can get it right. And then of course you were running a business where year on year you kept having to reinvest in new tech, new digital tech, so there was all that constant, and that seemed to have been accelerated over the last 5 years, where there was
massively
new speaker system, new desk, new effects, so there was, it feels to me like it's like almost a perfect storm of challenges that have come together to face SSE next year.
Yeah.
You and Sean are the people with 40 odd years experience. Are you going to be helping them out, or are you going to be running for the coast?
Oh no, I will be. Well, John's still going to be there, which
is he?
Yeah, so I'll still be there. You know, definitely by association, should we say? Yeah, John's got another year to do, or you know, he might stay longer. Who knows? It depends what else he can find to do. But yes, you're right. The massive investment all the time, and the manufacturers, you know, L Acoustics, D&B, keep coming up with, you know, the next cabinet that you have to have. And if you're us, you have to have it because you're, you know, you sell a lot of that equipment as well. So you've got to be seen to be owning it. It's going to be really difficult next year because will we have the appetite for investment? Probably not, to be honest, you know, but will we have to invest? Probably we will, because, you know, like I was just saying a minute ago, we might not have enough equipment anyway. Who knows? I mean, like I said, it probably would be a happy problem, but it's, yeah, difficult. And it's, the investment is ridiculous nowadays. And because we've always been at the leading edge, I mean, we always compare ourselves to the Formula One team. You know, we're always there leading the field, which means we drive it really, which is probably a bit unfair, but it's not really us driving it. It's more the manufacturers driving us. So the manufacturers come to us and say, you've got to have this, or the engineers come to us and say, oh, I want this. And it's like, well, you can have the tour, but you've got to have one of those. And it's like, oh my God, that's another 50 grand, you know. Yeah, it's all difficult. What can I say? We all know it's a massive, huge investment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're moving into video, so that's even worse, isn't it?
Are you? Oh goodness.
But I think that you say, Graham, in terms of that perfect storm and where artists are reevaluating, and that whole notion of travel and how we move about, and sort of the internationalism of our industry is another conversation in itself. There's not really time for that now, but I think that is a huge thing in terms of sustainability and how we go forward, and what that marketplace looks like in terms of the touring, and, you know, the whole notion of being on the buses and traveling internationally and flights. And, you know, our industry can't recover in isolation. It's got to recover with other industries going forward. So I think that's probably another topic of conversation.
But Brexit on top of the pandemic. It's just the double nightmare, isn't it? You know, because none of us know what's going to happen. I mean, the government don't know what's going to happen, and all they're doing is spending money on advertising, saying you need to prepare for this. Well, prepare for what? We don't know. It's absolutely ludicrous. You know, we don't know what we're going to do. And I keep, you know, Alex is on the phone to me every day going, oh, you know, what are we doing? Well, how are we going to buy stuff from Europe, and how are we going to send stuff to Europe? I'm like, I don't know, Alex. Nobody knows, but we're supposed to know. He goes, yeah, but nobody knows.
No,
it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. What a double whammy.
It is. Well, it's good to know that you're still going to be lending your expertise.
Oh, I'll still be around, Graham. You know, I'll probably still be at Frankfurt. Yeah. still be at all the festivals. So I don't think I'll be going very far.
Oh, good.
Hopefully not. Anyway,
enjoy a little bit of time out, Heather. You've earned it.
Oh, thanks, Graham. That's very sweet. Have a lovely Christmas.
Thanks, Graham. Thank you. So we've got another couple of minutes if anyone wants to ask anything else. But Heather, what if you had to name one of your absolute highlights of your last 45 years? What would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would say out front at a festival, listening to maybe Coldplay. Is that really awful?
Depends if you like Coldplay.
I do like Coldplay. I'm very old-fashioned in that respect, because I know they're probably not cool, but I do like Coldplay. And or you know, U2, any of those bands with the big anthems, Killers, you know, and us doing it and just being there on front of house, just being really proud. It's such a nice feeling. It really is. You get the best seat in the house and you get to feel really proud. It is lovely. And the worst nightmare is if it goes wrong, which thank God it doesn't go wrong very often nowadays. But, you know, there have been times in the past when it went wrong, and that's awful. Yeah. So you get the biggest highs and the biggest lows.
Absolutely. And would you have wanted to do anything else with your career, your life? No,
I don't think I would, actually. I think, you know, I would never in a million years have dreamed that I would ever be doing this when I was a teenager. And it's something that, you know, I fell into just because I met John. And yeah, it's been an amazing career, and I've really loved it. I mean, I haven't loved doing the accounts, and I haven't loved chasing in the money, but it's just been the necessary evil that I needed to do in order for the business to do what it's done, you know. And I do think it needed one of us on that, you know, on that financial side, just to make sure all the time that things were where they need to be, and keeping an eye on things. I mean, I'm a bit of a control freak.
I think that comes to lots of us, to be honest. I think that's a necessary given sometimes to be ambitious and to get by. Do you know what I mean? I think that's partly what you need to be, isn't it? And you know, I think when you've got a business and you commit, and like you say, you start employing other people.
Yeah,
you know, that sense of responsibility is massive.
It's a big responsibility. I mean, we've got, you know, so many people, and they've all got mortgages, and nowadays they've all got children as well. And I mean, that is a big responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Which is why it's doubly awful when you have to make people redundant. It's horrendous.
Yeah,
and you know what? I mean, of all the people we've made redundant, you know, they've all been so understanding. It's heartbreaking, you know. Oh, you know, I feel so, you know, they're saying to us, we feel sorry for you. This is terrible for you. And it's like, oh my God, you know, people are it's so sad. So all we're really hoping is that things pick up, and that we can re-employ, you know, the people who've not gone on to find something different.
Absolutely.
And that we, you know, hopefully this time next year, although I don't think we won't be recovered by this time next year, but, you know, hopefully 2 years' time, we might be getting back to somewhere
like normal.
Where we were at the end of 19. I mean, 2 or 3 years it's going to take us.
Absolutely.
Looking of following wind and 2 jabs in your arm. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, only if you're over 50, I think. But yeah, who knows? But anyway,
well,
Heather,
I'm well over 50, so I'm all right, Jack.
Heather, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your company this evening.
That's all right, Sarah.
And you know, it's been delightful to talk to you and celebrate your career. And you know, for lots of us, we're still on that journey, and you know, we really you know, admire and cherish everything.
Good luck to everyone on that journey. I think you've chosen a great industry, and you know, in that it's such a friendly industry, and it's a small industry. Everyone knows each other. It's good fun. It's your social life as well as your work life. The two sort of merge, really, don't they?
They do. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been listening to us this evening and joining us. You know, we really appreciate your company and your questions. And there's a whole program on the Speakeasy of Business, and more chats like this with different industry professionals. So, you know, check it out. Keep an eye on the website and the social posts. And, you know, we're here. The WeMakeEvents movement, as Heather said, is here to really support individuals and organizations, and to offer a listening ear and support, as well as all the sort of government lobbying and bits and pieces that the team are undertaking. So, you know, it is what we make it, and we're determined to get ourselves through this and out the other side, you know, as we've talked about this evening. So, Heather, a massive thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who's listened. And I guess as we're in December, we should probably say, have a great Christmas, or as best a Christmas you can under the circumstances. So, and we look forward to seeing and spending time with everybody in the new year.